Avoidants will always use the same 3 tests before they let you in emotionally. And no, it's not the usual stuff like pulling away or ghosting. These are tests happening right under your nose. And if you're not careful, you'll miss them completely. And once you understand everything about what they are, everything in your relationship will start to make sense. All right, so test number 1 is running the pain gauntlet. So I was reading psychology today and recently stumbled across this little excerpt from Hal Shorey, a clinical psychologist. He says, if you want to stay in the relationship, you should always be aware that you may also have to endure some testing behaviors. The person with the fearful style may engage in some negative or challenging behaviors to see if you are going to reject or hurt them. So basically, they're going to run you through what I like to call a pain gauntlet. Now, it's interesting. The phrase run the gauntlet is rooted in the 17th century, where a party judged guilty was forced to run between 2 rows of soldiers who strike out and attack them with sticks or other weapons. And the thinking was simple. Make it through the 2 rows of soldiers alive and you'd be let off free, perish, and, well, you're dead. And since you were judged guilty, justice has been served. Now, obviously, avoidants don't put the people they're with through a physical gauntlet, but they do put them through an emotional one. Imagine this. You're going through the early stages of a relationship and suddenly the person you're dating starts pulling back. They might cancel plans without reason, ignore your calls, or seem distant just when things were going well. It feels like you've been thrown into this unexpected challenge where the rules are unclear and your emotional endurance is being tested. Now here's the thing, there's no warning. One day things are going perfectly, the next they're completely cold. It's like a door slamming shut in a silent room. You're left standing there wondering what just happened. Well, you found yourself running the pain gauntlet. Now, it's not about survival in a literal sense. It's about survival of the relationship. The avoidant will push you to see how much you can endure. They'll withdraw affection, become inconsistent, even criticize you subtly. Now, all while closely watching your reaction. Why though? Why put someone they supposedly care about through this insane test? Well, it comes down to their core wound, their overwhelming need for independence. The need didn't just appear out of nowhere, it's actually rooted in their early childhood experiences. As a child, they likely received inconsistent care. One moment, a caregiver might have soothed them, showing comfort and safety. The next, the same caregiver might have gotten angry or impatient, expecting the child to deal with things on their own. Erica Comazar, a licensed clinical social worker who I had the pleasure of interviewing, ties this concept into sailing through the Caribbean.
Babies are born. It's like being on a sailboat in the Atlantic. What mothers do is they bring babies back to the Caribbean. It's not this, because that would be strange and depressed. Right. It's like this.
So essentially what she's saying is that from a very young age, avoidants had to learn to create their own Caribbean of sorts because their caregivers did such a poor job at it. So what do avoidants learn? Well, they learn that closeness is unreliable, that leaning on others is dangerous because it can turn into rejection at any moment. So as adults, they recreate this pattern, putting those closest to them through the same emotional whiplash. It's a way of protecting themselves from the fear of being let down again. The goal here, though likely unconscious, is to confirm their very worst fear, that anyone who gets close enough will eventually leave. In the avoidant's mind, every blow they deal, whether it's emotional coldness, withdrawal, or rejection, it's like a test to see how you're going to respond. Will you still stick around? Or will you confirm what they've always believed all along? That no one can handle the real them and love always ends in abandonment. The longer you endure this emotional gauntlet without running away, the more they might start to believe that maybe, just maybe, you're different. Maybe you won't hurt them. And it makes sense, right? But even talking about this is a little ironic. I mean, it's incredibly taxing on the other person in the relationship. Because while you're trying to prove your loyalty, it feels like you're sacrificing a part of yourself just to be in this situation. And I don't want anyone to think that this behavior is normal. It's not. In fact, it's borderline abusive. But I'm going to slow my roll here. We'll talk a lot about this later. Ultimately, at the end of this gauntlet, there are two possible outcomes. You either pass the test and get a glimpse of their vulnerability, or you fail and they retreat further, convinced that they were right all along to keep people at a distance. It's a cycle that is exhausting for both sides, but it pales in comparison to the next test. The Phantom X Perfection Test. Meet Linnell. On August 21st, 2014, she appeared on Oprah and shocked the world when she let her ideal man list be known. There were 43 items. He had to be African American, with dark complexion, tall, 6'2" or taller. He had to have an athletic body, 230 pounds, dark eyes, straight white teeth, all 32 of them, God-fearing, attend service regularly, he needs to be a millionaire, have a sense of humor, ambitious with drive, and be generous. I mean, I could literally go on, but the list just literally goes on and on and on, and there are 43 of these qualities. Now, if you look at the comments in the Oprah video where this list went viral, people are lighting Linnell up. It always amuses me when I meet a woman with a long ideal man list. Usually they have the least amount to offer and comes with the most baggage. Peep how the first half of that list was all superficial attributes. Hope she found someone the complete opposite to humble her. God forbid her ideal man ever lost income or worse, got injured, shaking my head. And remember, fellas, we're supposed to be the shallow ones. Now here's the thing. That list of Linnell's is actually eerily similar to this second test. All right, I'm going to give you the secret to understanding all avoidant behavior, and it is comically simple. If you ever want to understand why they're doing something that seemingly makes no sense to you, just apply this simple statement to their logic. Will this allow me to have more independence? Every avoidant has a Linnell list, except theirs doesn't stop at 43 qualities. It keeps growing. Anyone who has been an avid watcher of this YouTube channel knows that I talk a lot about the Phantom X concept in relation to avoidance. Now, according to Attached, one of the consequences of devaluing your romantic relationship is that you often wake up long after the relationship has gone stale, having forgotten all those negative things that annoyed you about your partner, wondering what went wrong and reminiscing longingly about your long-lost love. We call it the Phantom X phenomenon. Ultimately, at its core, the Phantom X is a deactivation strategy, something they can use to keep you at an arm's length. For them, it's better to daydream about a long-lost love than to commit to the person right in front of them. But here's where I think many people get it wrong. Most people assume that an avoidant fixates on one Phantom X, one person that they're just obsessed about, the one that got away. The truth? I think it's a lot more complicated than that. Yes, an avoidant might have a predominant Phantom X, someone they seem to romanticize more than others. But the reality is they don't just stop there. They take the best parts from all their past relationships, picking and choosing qualities, attributes, and experiences that they loved, and fuse them together to create a kind of Frankenstein Phantom X. It's not just one person that they're daydreaming about. It's a composite of all their previous partners, stitched together into an impossible standard no real person can live up to. Now, this Frankenstein-like Phantom X is perfect in their eyes. It meets all of their needs without them having to make themselves vulnerable. They don't have to worry about emotional intimacy or getting too close because in their mind, the Phantom X literally can't hurt them. The idea of this perfect, unattainable love becomes a protective barrier, something they can retreat into whenever the real relationship feels too overwhelming or vulnerable. Now here's the kicker. No one in the real world can ever measure up to this Frankenstein-like X. It gives the avoidant an excuse to keep pulling back, keeping you at arm's length, all while continuing to chase a fantasy they've created out of fragments of their past. Test number 3, the global gauntlet repeat. Look at this. you're an avid watcher of this YouTube channel, you've seen it before. It's my avoidant death wheel. Basically, it's a cyclical pattern that all avoidants go through in relationships. From craving love and connection to pulling away to devaluing their partner, eventually distancing themselves entirely. It's a constant loop of emotional highs and lows where they seek closeness, but then once you get too close, they run away. Now, take special note of stage 2 in the avoidant death wheel, the "I've found someone, my troubles are over" stage. This is essentially the honeymoon period where everything feels perfect and both people are just enjoying each other's company without any real pressure or expectation. Here's my theory. Avoidants, if they had it their way, would want to live in stage 2 indefinitely. Think about it. It's the ideal setup for them. During the honeymoon phase, you're not talking about serious commitment. There's no pressure to define the relationship. Everything feels light, fun, and exciting. They get to experience all the highs and lows of connection without the fear of losing their independence. It's like the best of both worlds for an avoidant. They can indulge in the emotional high of a new relationship without the risk of feeling trapped. There's no need to dive into the deeper, scarier parts of a relationship that require emotional vulnerability or discussions about the future. In this phase, they get closeness on their terms without having to sacrifice their cherished freedom. But it doesn't last forever. Eventually, their partner will want more. That's where stage 3, 4, and 5 of the avoidant death wheel come into play. If you're wondering, that's where they start giving you these tests that we're talking about in this video. They'll run you through the gauntlet, testing your emotional endurance by pulling back, withdrawing affection, and becoming inconsistent. If you somehow manage to survive that, well, congratulations, you're still not done. Because next, they're going to hit you with the Phantom X test, comparing you to an impossible standard. At this point, you literally have to be perfection personified. They're going to measure you up against this Frankenstein-like ideal Phantom X from their past. And as you've probably guessed, no one can live up to this ideal. But let's play devil's advocate and say that someone does make it through the gauntlet. Someone does manage to live up to the Frankenstein-like ideal. Guess what happens next? They'll literally repeat the whole process again and again. And that's the maddening part about avoidance. Even if you manage to survive the gauntlet once, and even if you somehow measure up to their impossible standards, it doesn't mean the cycle is over. Far from it. The avoidant will just reset, and before you know it, you're right back at the beginning of the avoidant death wheel. And here's the kicker. It's only after they've put you through this cycle multiple times, only after you prove over and over and over again that you can be trusted, that they'll finally let you in emotionally. They need to see that you're capable of handling their distance, not just one time, but multiple times. That's how you earn their trust. For the avoidant, trust isn't built in a single moment of loyalty or patience. It's something you have to demonstrate again and again, surviving each test they throw your way. And it's only after you survive all these tests that they begin to truly believe that you're not going to abandon them when they open up to you. But by then, the relationship is already worn down by the weight of those endless tests. And therein lies the issue with avoidance. There's a truth that I think most people are too afraid to tell you. I think it's common, especially in the very early stages of dating, for people who are dating avoidants to overanalyze or sometimes even justify their behaviors. They'll come up with optimistic interpretations like, "This is just their way of testing me," or "They're pushing me away because they're scared of how much they care." It becomes this narrative where enduring the hardship seems like proof of the relationship's uniqueness, as if surviving the emotional turbulence means you've earned a special bond. But here's the reality. When you're dating, especially before there's any real true commitment, this kind of behavior is a red flag, not a challenge to overcome. There's a dysfunction in the way people in these scenarios just accept this behavior, thinking, "Yep, I've got this, we're different." They believe they're going to be the exception to the rule, but more often than not, they just end up getting dumped or ghosted. It's like all the literature on avoidance, all these videos out there talking about them fuels these fantasy bonds. People lean on all these stories of avoidance, and they're just sitting there thinking, if I stick this out, eventually they're going to let me in. But more often than not, it ends the same way. No contact. The cycle repeats, and people are left grieving over a relationship that had a shaky foundation to begin with. The truth is, in a committed relationship, maybe there's more room for working through these testing behaviors, but in the early stages of dating, accepting them with the belief that they signal something deeper or unique just sets up people for disappointment. It's a trap that keeps them stuck in an unhealthy cycle. I think the goal when it comes to dating avoidance should always be the same. Work toward a more secure outcome while staying out of that vicious death wheel. You can't ignore the warning signs, hoping they're going to turn into something stable down the road. If you find yourself caught in these cycles where the highs and lows keep pulling you back in, it's time to take a step back and ask if this relationship is truly moving toward security, or if you're just spinning around hoping for a change that may never come. In the end, progress in a relationship is about mutual effort, not endurance. And when you're stuck in the death wheel, you're not really building anything, you're just surviving.